The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NBA Big 3 in 30. The 3 biggest stories in the NBA from our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The NBA Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in the NBA.
It's Pacers 2, Thunder 1 through 3 games of the finals.
You are Locked On NBA Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What a game Game 3 became, Rylan. I was not necessarily, I would say, surprised that the Pacers were able to respond because they're very good at that, but the method in which they did it, I don't think many saw coming.
Yeah, I don't think that the Pacers, anyone saw them playing this level of defense against Oklahoma City for the 48 minutes that they just absolutely hounded OKC. I thought that they not only stuck true to what we talked about in our crossover leading into Game 3 of making Shea play in a crowd, but off of getting the ball out of Shea's hands, they also recovered exceptionally well onto the Thunder's complementary pieces, and it forced them to get out of rhythm. And the offense just completely bogged down for OKC. In the last 5 and change, they didn't score but 1 field goal. Like, that was awful. And it's a large credit to Indiana and the way that they played defense.
Yeah, outside of J-Dub, who can do this like line drive to the rim floater thing that he hadn't done all series and then did like 7 times in that game, there wasn't a lot of just like stuff that looked unstoppable for OKC in a way that they had in Game 2 with their offense flowing. 18 points in the fourth quarter was crazy, especially because the Thunder closed the third so strong. Going in, everybody thought, okay, there's momentum, right? They're playing well. They're shooting well in the game. Like, they might have this. And then I think they battled fine for the first like 6 minutes of the fourth, but they just kind of fell apart. And I think the Pacers defense deserves a lot of credit. Like, to put the face on it to me of 2 plays, it was very late in the game, the back-to-back plays where one Miles Turner blocks to the Chet Holmgren 3 and then recovers to block him at the rim. And the very next play, Siakam gets switched on to Shea, stays down on him on the move, forces him to get off of it. By the time he gets it back, it's a bad contested shot. Pacers get the board. And those were in like 6 or 5 point game territory where shots were huge. Like, Rick Carlisle often calls that a 1 possession game, even though it's not, just because it's so close. You just never know. And they really locked them up there. They were so dialed into those little tiny details of defense that mattered in those plays. And it wasn't there all night, certainly, but that was the best defensive game they played this season. And there's lots of bench guys I want to get to individually, but what do you think of the way the Thunder are responding to this defense? Because like a lot's been made about their pass number per game being as low as it's been like at all this season. Are they playing into the Pacers' hands? Or are they not playing their way? What's going on here? Because the Pacers defense is doing a very good job.
Yeah, I think that they're not being as decisive and quick with the basketball as they have all season long. And I think that part of that is because of the speed and athleticism the Pacers are playing with right now on the defensive end. I think that they're forcing the issue for OKC. And I think that for the majority of Game 3, the Pacers look like the more desperate team, the team that had more intensity in an NBA Finals game. There's not really an excuse to not have that stuff, but Indiana certainly did. And Indiana flipped the script on OKC. Like, the way that they won this game was overcoming a poor shooting night, even at home, and getting and owning the paint on both ends. And they did that exceptionally well for Indiana. And OKC just had nowhere to go. They couldn't convert in the paint. They couldn't convert in the mid-range, and it cost them big time. But I do think that the lower level of passing from OKC is attributed to Indiana's defense.
I don't watch the game and feel like OKC's ball movement's like so bad. That's why it's so interesting to me that it's settled out this way. Maybe it's just because they move it way better in their best games, right? But I haven't been like, it's sticking. Right? Like, the guys it ends up with is like who I think it should be with. I don't ever walk away feeling like that. I just think the Pacers have done a good job of that. And the other part of the fourth quarter I'll be curious to get your take on is it's now gone viral as a screenshot, but it was very noticeable in the game too, of like dead ball moment, Thunder, all their players, hands on the knees, wheezing, catch your breath. And the Pacers have coined this now, the wear down effect of playing the Pacers and their speed and their tempo and their pressure. And the Thunder provided pressure too, to be clear. Was there a gassed element to you to this? Are people overthinking this because of it? If like had the Thunder won, no one would be talking about this. Like, how do you feel about their late game execution in that way?
Yeah, they obviously did not execute well down the stretch of this game, and I think that it's a legit factor for SGA specifically. Whenever the Thunder did concede way too many switches, and the Pacers did a great job of getting Shea into every single action, to where he's having to work really hard defensively, harder than he typically does have to work on that end of the floor, which is affecting his offensive game, affecting his legs in a big way. The Thunder have to be better at fighting through those screens and not necessarily hiding Shea. But look, Shea is a good defender for what you would expect of a superstar with his usage rate, but he's not a attack defender. He's not even close to the guy who you would want out there on an island trying to stop Therese Halliburton, trying to stop the ball. You'd want Lou out there, you'd want Caruso out there, you'd want Kaysen out there. And the Pacers did a great job of finding that mismatch and forcing Shea to go from a help defender where he's excellent to a point of attack defender where he's not so great. And that did wear on him on the offensive end, as well as the fact that all game on the offensive end, Shea could not get clean shots. He had to work for every single shot attempt. He had to work for every opportunity to score. The Pacers forced him to play in that crowd and make tough shots. And Shea's an excellent scorer, so he still made tough shots. But those are the ones that you live with because of the wear down effect that you've mentioned. And that kind of ties into the passing we were talking about before. I agree that I don't think that the ball stopped for OKC. I don't think that they've just been putrid in terms of looking to pass. I think that the biggest notion that Indiana's done well is when you look at OKC and how they like to run these DHOs and how they like to pass and pitch off of screens. Indiana's blowing that stuff up right away to where that DHO with Hartenstein and with Chet, like that's not creating any advantages in terms of numbers, in terms of shot quality. And that's been a huge difference for OKC compared to the rest of the season.
Which is fascinating because the opposite just happened for the Pacers. I thought they needed to get more into that side-to-side stuff, use Turner as that fulcrum DHO guy, and that worked very well to get Halliburton going, and I presume would have been helpful for Turner had he not been under the weather and played a pretty poor game until late. But yeah, I totally agree with all that part of it. And like, yeah, Shea never saw daylight. I didn't get to talk about this enough on my own show because of going through the Mather and stuff and the McConnell stuff and the 10,000 mini moments and the Stars being good. But like Andrew Nembhard's defense was just awesome in game 3 on Shea. And that's the stuff he could do. Like he did that to Brunson in game 6 of that Knicks series. You know, it's not all the time. Like Brunson torched him sometimes last year and at times this year, but he has a level that he can hit as a guard pest defender. People think of him as just like a lockdown kind of guy or like he's pretty good against the Stars, and he is, but like he's pretty pesty. He's learned stuff from McConnell in that way. He's kind of innate in that way, and you could really see it bothering to the extent Shea has ever bothered, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? He's an MVP, but like actually making him work harder for those points. And so even though he might still have whatever night he has, it adds up by the end of the game to something more challenging. And I thought, he only took 5 shots, but a very impactful game from Nembhard that kind of gets lost in the shuffle of all the many things they did defensively.
Yeah, and especially for him. I mean, you look at the fighting through foul trouble that the Pacers had to do this really the whole game. I mean, at halftime, there's 3 starters with 3 fouls. But also the fourth quarter, Shea took 3 shots. Like that's his quarter. That's when you're supposed to close it out. And he got to play more in the fourth quarter than his typical rotation. They brought him in earlier because they took him out earlier in the third. And he can only get 3 shots up because of how uncomfortable Indiana was able to make him.
What other did anything tactically change to you defensively for the Pacers? Do you feel like this was just upped ability, the classic play better adjustment? I mean, I felt like they did better fighting through screens. Tyrese Halliburton talked about that himself. He mentioned being up at the level a little bit more, so like drivers can't veer into the paint so easily before they get past him. And there were fewer lanes for the Thunder. I think that's part of their passing, but I think that stuff is just better execution more so than any like real tactical shift from the Pacers.
Yeah, I thought that it was better execution in terms of blowing up screens and fighting over screens. Also, that they were excellent at tag and recover stuff in this game where they were able to show somebody at the elbow or at the nail or in the mid-paint on J-Dub and Shea, then still fly out and contest a 3, and then have another guy on the back line. Like you look at the Lou Dort triples, and for the Thunder, it's really discouraging to go 0-2 in the 2 games that Lou shot the ball well. But some of the 3s he made, like he got a flyby, and yet there's another pacer on his shot and in contest.
That rainbow left corner 3 was the prettiest jump shot I've ever seen in my life. That was the most perfect swish it was unbelievable. It was perfect. It was
unreal. And you've watched Caitlin Clark switch in plenty of 3s in that building. So, a pretty jump shot when you see one. I think that, Lou did a great job of still making that, but those shots were not just conceded. I think that sometimes whenever we're just dissecting like then that game 3 preview of how to stop Shea, we view it as like, oh, well, get the ball out of Shea's hands and kind of forget about it. No, the Pacers got the ball out of Shea's hands and then still played great defense on top of that to the Thunder's role players, and that really hurt them.
The bench for the Thunder, Aaron Wiggins, Alex Caruso, was awesome in game 2. In game 3, the Pacers bench was just sensational. That was my first segment of a finals game, was running through the Benedict Mathurin dominance, the TJ McConnell, the perfect TJ McConnell game. The steals on the inbounds, the flip shots that everyone's like, wait, a 6'1" guy just made that? 5 assists, actually able to get in the lane against a good Thunder defense. And Obi Toppin, who just has this gazelle-y, jumpy pace element add to the game that the Thunder don't really have on their team. They all were great, and that made the Pacers able to play deep and for long. What did you notice in the bench flip from game 2 to 3?
I thought that it was a more comfortable bench unit for Indiana, an uncomfortable one for Oklahoma City, but it does come down to the paint. I mean, the Thunder did not protect the paint at anywhere close to the level you have to win an NBA Finals game, and Indiana did. And so you mentioned that, like Ben Mathurin, who I thought, did not just hit open shots. I thought he hit some very, very difficult shots, especially at the rim, especially through contact. And it's like the Thunder didn't have guys to do that. The Thunder didn't have guys who were able to play with force the way that Indiana did. They did not have, TJ really pulled an Alex Caruso, like where he just came in and immediately sets a tone and flips the script of the tenor of the game, especially with his hustle and defensive ability. And you mentioned the rim finishing, which Caruso's been good at for the Thunder overall, but not in this series, not in this game for OKC. So I thought that the bench was a big deciding factor, just like we thought, Tony, before the series, where we were saying that one of the big X factors of one of the big reasons that either team will win is who has more moments from this bench. Like, who can you look back on and say, oh, that was the so-and-so game. And right now, Indiana's had more of those moments, and they've had, Ben Mathurin, who, if they win a championship and they hold on to this series he'll never have to pay for anything in the rest of his life in Indiana, as long as he lives. So, credit to him. But yeah, I thought that the bench scoring completely flipped, both numerically, but also in the comfort and the force that they played with.
Yeah, that Mathurin game was just special. Like, he's the only guy on the team that can do a lot of stuff that he did in that game. And a lot of times the Pacers don't like, it's not that they don't want that. They just don't like the way they play. It doesn't require it. They needed it in that game. He was awesome. And McConnell just like I want to ask you this kind of generically. Like, I know that I've done the story on it. I've asked a billion people on both teams, what makes the Thunder rim protection so good, right? How is this so possible? Is there any type of non-star player who can routinely bust into the Thunder paint and actually make plays? Because McConnell, for all the warts in his game, like, it felt like it could be a tough series for him. Non-shooter against that defense, has to have the ball a lot. Good luck. But he is the only guy, I guess Mathurin in game 3 too, but like, he can get in there. He doesn't always have a good angle to shoot, but like, he's getting in the paint every single time. Is that actually a Thorne thing? What's going on there?
Yeah, I think that's just a TJ McCollum thing. I think that he's the only one who's able to do it. The Thunder's defense has been predicated on swarming the ball once you can get near a paint touch, and forcing the ball out to the perimeter where it's a more volatile shot, to where sometimes you get burned by it, but other times the ball just rims out on you. You miss the open three, and away you go on the other end if you're OKC. But TJ has been excellent at probing the lane. Now, again, sometimes he doesn't have the shot lane like you mentioned. Sometimes the numbers aren't there for him to go up with it, but he's been able to get his way into the paint, which is a tough task. And that's why you haven't seen it done a ton. Not only do the Thunder swarm very well, but they have such active hands and disciplined hands to where they pick their spots properly of when to swipe at the ball, oftentimes producing turnovers. And TJ has not let that happen. And I think that TJ played with the most grit and heart and all the stuff that you love to talk about of anyone on the court, and it paid off for him.
The NBA playoffs are winding down, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if that first bet wins. FanDuel makes betting easy, whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, there are so many ways to bet your favorite props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine a live prop bet into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. You can place that first $5 bet on who you think will win the Super Bowl. How about that? The Buffalo Bills, with the shortest odds. plus 700. But if you're looking for better payoff, down the road, can I interest you in the Green Bay Packers at 22-1? Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today.
The Knicks head coach search goes on, and after a lot of flirting with some coaches that already have jobs, they now are ready to move into the next phase of their coaching search.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast.
Updates on where the Knicks stand in their coaching search. So a few notes first here. So Shams Charania of ESPN says another one. The New York Knicks have requested permission to speak with Atlanta Hawks head coach Quinn Snyder, but were firmly denied. Sources tell ESPN. Mark Stein says the Knicks have now formally requested permission to speak to Mavericks, and this is a hilarious faux pas, assistant coach Jason Kidd, and the request was denied by Dallas League. Sources tell Mark Stein and Dallas Sports. And then Casey Johnson of the Chicago Sports Network said the Knicks requested permission to speak to Billy Donovan for their coaching vacancy, but were denied per sources. The Bulls value Donovan highly for his coaching acumen, communication skills, and ability to connect with players and all members of the organization. Elsewhere, of course, in previous days, it's been reported that the Knicks were rebuffed on asking to speak to Chris Finch of the Minnesota Timberwolves, to Ime Udoka of the Houston Rockets. So there's a lot going on in terms of the Knicks trying to talk to incumbent head coaches around the league. And I think the lesson that we can get here now is that maybe all of this Jason Kidd smoke and all the smoke about various employed candidates around the league was perhaps just that. Just smoke, just the Knicks doing due diligence. Ian Begley did a TV spot on SNY and had a pretty good point here, which was that the Knicks are just kind of kicking the tires on everything. Begley said they're turning over every stone. They're trying to get an idea of who is and who isn't available. He referred to it as a facts-finding mission. And he said what they don't want to happen is, let's say they hire a Frank Vogel. Now, that's not a name I've heard a lot, but that is just the name that he floated out there as a hypothetical. But he said, let's say they hire a Frank Vogel and then find out Jason Kidd was available. That would be a big mistake, but also know the Mavericks have no reason to grant that permission. But behind the scenes, that saber rattling could still happen in terms of Kidd, kind of forcing his way out of town, which again, maybe that's why that scenario gained the most traction out of all of them. Just the fact that everyone's brought up and I've brought up and Gavin's brought up and whatever, that Jason Kidd has a precedent of forcing his way out of a coaching situation rather abruptly, with the Nets moving to the Bucks a number of years ago. So, it's not completely out of the question that he would potentially try to force his way out. But there's been all kinds of evidence, including, the Mavs hiring a new lead assistant and Nico Harrison apparently telling said person that Jason Kidd is in place and not going to be on the move. I guess we've seen him move guys that we thought were not necessarily going to be on the move before, just this past season, and Luka Doncic. So maybe take it with a grain of salt, but I'm kind of inclined to believe they want to stick with Jason Kidd. They're happy with him. He did just bring them to the finals a season ago, and it seems to me like they're pretty locked in with him and want him to be the voice for Cooper Flagg and to coach this Kyrie Irving and Anthony Davis tandem, and hopefully try to get after a championship and hopefully get to the finals again. So I don't know. I think the Kidd thing, I'm willing to, at least at this point, until further notice, just kind of rule that as that was smoke. That was just, it was something that the Knicks kicked the tires on, and then some places ran with it and, took that as, hey, they're super duper interested. And in reality, hey, maybe they would have given him an interview or whatever, but I don't know that this was like a silver platter situation where they were prepared to just, like, if they got permission with Jason Kidd, they were prepared to just serve up the job to him and say, hey, here you go. Actually, there's a really nice note from Christian Winfield of the New York Daily News, couple paragraphs here that sort of zero in on where that all stands. So Winfield says the Leon Rose-led front office remains quote, singularly focused on winning a championship. I think that was Leon's own words from the press release. Winfield then continues, with no active competition for available candidates, the Knicks are prepared to wait. They believe multiple qualified options remain on the board. And with the 2024-25 season still in the middle of the NBA Finals, the Knicks are using the time to evaluate every possible path forward. With Ott, that's Jordan Ott, formerly of the Cavs, off the board, and Quinn Snyder, Jason Kidd, Ime Udoka, and Finch all unavailable. Chris Finch all unavailable. Former Knicks assistant Johnny Bryant remains a top candidate. So are several experienced coaches who were let go during the season, including Mike Brown of Sacramento, Mike Malone, formerly of Denver, Mike Budenholzer, formerly of Phoenix, and Taylor Jenkins, formerly of Memphis. So that's from Christian Winfield. So, I think that's kind of roughly where I'm standing at the moment, which is the Knicks are for once. I mean, I feel like typically when you look at the NBA landscape, there's usually, going into any given offseason, multiple head coach vacancies. There's, multiple teams that are looking to add a coach, which creates a little bit of a sense of urgency to get your interviews done, to lock in on your candidate, to make your offer, to get them, in place and whatever. The Knicks sort of don't have that. And actually, it works pretty well for them, I think, to be able to just canvass the league, really take their time, show no sense of urgency. And like Christian Winfield says there, they're not really in a position where they feel like they have to scramble or do anything too quickly here. So yeah, I'm pretty good with where the Knicks are at right now. I think it's just going to require on the part of the Knicks, and then maybe more so, it seems like the Knicks don't have any issue being patient, but maybe more so on the part of the fans and content creators and even reporters to just show a little patience. I think we're seeing things start to come into focus a little bit here. And it seems like, for the most part, what we've seen for the last week since Tibbs was fired is just the Knicks canvassing the league for any employed people. So they've gone down the list of all the guys that currently have jobs in the NBA that they would have potentially wanted to be their head coach. They've called all of their incumbent teams. All the incumbent teams have said, no, thank you. We like our coach. That's why we hired him. And the Knicks said, okay, good to know. Well, I guess we'll just keep moving on then.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to track your finances, get a hold of your spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. Track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year.
Jaylen Brown has knee surgery, which gives us clarity. So let's start with the surgery, which Jaylen Brown had on Wednesday, June 11th. As the Celtics put out a very short release that said Jaylen Brown underwent a successful right knee arthroscopic debridement procedure. He is expected to participate in training camp without limitation. Debridement. What's a debridement? It's like a removal of whatever that tear is. It's not characterized as meniscectomy, I think. Is that the pronunciation? Whatever, however you pronounce it, that's not what they characterize it as. So this seems like a minor procedure. It's like almost like a partial removal of what the tear was. It's not a full repair. Full repair means he would be out for months. This means he's going to be out for weeks at best. So honestly, this puts him right in that same timeline as if they had been playing in the finals, and he would have taken a few weeks off in June and get started at the beginning of July. I fully expect Jaylen to be tweeting out or posting on Instagram workout videos within a few weeks, beginning of July. He'll be back out on the floor. I do not expect this to be a problematic recovery, but there are some differences between the repair and this removal to whatever degree the removal was. A repair takes longer to recover from, and it does not leave him as open to future, arthritis or anything like that. Taking out a piece of the meniscus. The meniscus, for those of you who don't know, in your knee, it's basically a shock absorber. It's cartilage. It's a C-shaped cartilage in your knee, so the two bones don't hit together. And if you remove any of it, then the bones, have the potential to hit together later in life. And when bones hit bones, that's arthritis. So there is a risk somewhere down the line that he could develop that if there's further damage to that meniscus. That's up to Jaylen Brown. I don't think this is that big of a risk because it doesn't even seem like a full removal of that area. So it seems like this is a really best case scenario for him, in which he's not going to miss any time. He'll be back on the floor soon. He'll be his normal self. The Celtics expect him to be his normal self. He'll be back. He'll be Jaylen Brown, which is great. The repair would have taken months to recover from, and that would have put the Celtics in a much different spot. So the news for Jaylen is good, and I didn't expect it to be bad. I thought Jaylen's decision was. I feel like he's weighing different options, but let's just be clear on what Jaylen is facing here to start the season. He finally gets to be the guy on the Celtics, and not that he has been pining for a shot at doing this himself. He certainly hasn't been like rooting for anything with Jason Tatum or anything like that. But there's no doubt that Jaylen Brown has felt slighted, less appreciated than he should be. So this is an opportunity for him to say, okay, listen, I can be the number one guy. And you know what? He doesn't have to be traded to be the number one guy. This is good for everybody. This ultimately is good for everybody. And we'll get to the trade stuff in the third segment, like I said, but just to touch on it a little bit now, Jaylen has an opportunity to make himself look pretty good as the number one guy on the Boston Celtics for however long Jason Tatum is out. And if the Celtics can keep floating, near the top, if they can be as good as they have been to some degree, some 70, 80, 90% as good as they've been, that puts them in a pretty good spot. They'll still be fighting in that top 2 or 3. If they're in that range and Jaylen's having a good season, the Celtics are winning a bunch of games, that's good for Jaylen because he gets a little bit of vindication. I've always known I can do this, but for some people, they needed some level of proof. So if you take it as proof, good for you, but I always knew I could do this. He gets to say that. Brad Stevens gets to say, hey, we do actually have to trade this guy because finances, second apron, the league doesn't want 2 superstars on this with 2 super max players making about $60 million a piece. You can't have that and be a non-tax, non-apron team. So Jaylen's going to probably have to go at some point. Well, here you go. NBA, here's your whole almost full season of Jaylen as the number one guy, and look at how good he's doing. So if that happens, then Brad's like, yeah, the number of picks that it's going to take to get Jaylen Brown has gone way up. There's potential here that the Celtics can finagle, a few picks. I'm not looking at it like, multiple firsts and swaps and all of that stuff. Although maybe you can say, hey, if you're getting all that from Mikal Bridges, then what is Jaylen Brown worth? But I don't expect him to be that level of trade. But maybe a team that was saying, hey, he's only worth like a couple of firsts. This could be like, hey, a couple of firsts and a swap or 2 if he has that kind of season. Having the surgery now gets him right into position. I was afraid that the meniscus tear was going to derail his preparation for the season, but the surgery that he chose makes it very likely that he's going to have a full summer to add to whatever he wants to this game, to his game, and he'll be able to proceed and be the best Jaylen Brown that he could possibly be.